This is my Cooler Mill Control deck. 1 copy of the leader. 4 Cooler Tyrannical Assault. 4 Cooler Suffocating Tyranny. 4 Full Power Frieza 100% Overdrive. 4 Exploding Weakness Vegeta. 4 Kaioken Goku. 4 Yamcha Merciless Barrage. 4 Oceania Shenron Negative Energy Explosion. 4 Gowasu Manipulative Supremacy. 4 Testing That Position. 4 Violent Rays. 3 Lord Slug Giant Force. 3 Shenron Unison of Calamity. 3 Jiren the Legend of Universe 11. And 1 SS3 Gohanks Interdimensional Warrior. So the idea of the deck, obviously other than milling, right? Milling is part of the deck strategy, of course, and a win con, is also just controlling your opponent's draws through the effects of Gowasu, along with the milling effects of the leader. We also have some hand control elements by stuff like, Lord Slug having crit, for example, so that way when you do deal damage with it, your opponent doesn't add anything to their hand. And then we got Shenron's ability to -2 and let you look at your opponent's hand, get rid of something. So there's some hand control elements there. Also putting your opponent in a position where, because you're minusing things, making things weaker, you're forcing them in situations where they have to use resources from their hands to try to out combo if they want to protect something or they want to deal damage. A lot of these minus effects, you tend to play them more on your opponent's turn than your turn, so that will put their battle cards in weaker power, so they'll have to combo to make them stronger or do something to make them stronger, in order if they want to deal some damage, right? So you'll take advantage of that. So again, some hand control there. You definitely want to make it where your opponent's hands are not as good as it could be. So that way, that gives you an advantage where, you got good cards, your opponent doesn't have good cards. Pro tip, right? It's important to understand when you're doing the whole milling thing. It's not discriminative milling. You want to be able to mill specific, so you want to be able to combine the milling effects of the leader along with Gowazu's draw manipulating capabilities, so that way you mill specific stuff. For example, when you're going up against a graveyard graveyard based deck like Dark Broly, for example, you don't want to send battle cards to the drop area through your mill effects. You want to send extra cards and unisons, things like that. You don't want to send battle cards to the drop, because it benefits the deck. Same goes for any other black deck that benefits from battle cards getting milled. Like time agents, for example, right? So you don't want to benefit those types of decks. So you let them have their battle cards because you can deal with their battle cards when they play them later on with your minus effects. But you don't want to send them to the drop. You rather send their extra cards and unisons to the drop. But against a deck where it's not, their battle cards don't benefit them in the drop area, those are the decks you definitely want to mill their battle cards. So that's the pro tip for that. So the leader has first auto is when this card attacks a leader card, draw a card. But since we don't want to deal our opponent damage, because they'll benefit from that, we'll avoid attacking with our leader on the front side anyway at first. Second auto, when the power of one of your opponent's battle cards is decreased, your opponent places the top card of the deck to the draw area. And that's every time. Since this auto is not once per turn, it triggers every time you do a minus effect. So obviously we have cards here that can minus multiple times, which will allow us to mill our opponent more than once a turn, which is what we want, to keep milling. Then we have a third auto, once per turn, if it's your opponent's turn, when the power of one of your opponent's battle cards is decreased by a skill of one of your battle cards, right? Battle cards specifically, draw a card. So we have a way to still draw, right? A way to replace a lot of our cards that we're playing, so that way we don't lose hand advantage. We definitely want our opponent to lose hand advantage. We definitely want them to use up their resources. So that way we have the advantage of out-resourcing them. And then to awaken, you need 4 art. To awaken, when you have 4 or less life, draw a card, switch one of your energy to active mode, and flip this card over. It's the same effects as the front. First auto when he attacks, draw a card, which is different than attacking a leader. So you could attack a battle card and draw, so that's really nice to have the ability to attack battle cards and draw, so that way you can keep your opponent's board under control and still have hand advantage. This is the 50 card deck, keep that in mind. So the goal is to mill your opponent out, try to avoid accidentally decking yourself out through drawing a lot. Second auto, same as the front. Whenever your opponent's battle cards lose power, they mill for the top of their deck, a card each time. And third auto, once per turn, when the power of one of your opponent's battle cards is decreased by skill by one of your battle cards, draw a card. Notice this doesn't say during your opponent's turns, it just says one of your opponent's battle cards. So he's stronger on the awakened side of you draw for attacking, period, and then you, once per turn, no matter whose turn it is, you draw for decreasing your opponent's power. So as you can see, once you awaken, you draw a lot. Right? You'll draw on your turn, your opponent's turn. You'll draw for attacking, a lot of drawing. So when you need it, right? It's better to have and not need than to need and not have, right? It's better to have the ability to draw a lot and not need to do it than to need to do it and can't do it, right? But we're mainly focusing on trying to control our opponent's board, our opponent's hand, our opponent's deck, our opponent's life. I'm trying to control everything under Cooler's control. So we got Cooler Tyrannical Assault, has 20k double strike with Arrival, red balloon. Take care, man. You too. Arrival, red blue, so you pay 1 red energy. You might notice that there's no red blue super combos, so you will be comboing 1 energy, paying 1 energy to combo a card to do this. I don't have a problem with doing that, but a lot of other people would. A lot of other people would specifically want a free way to trigger Arrival. I don't require it, but others do. Anyway, since you can Arrival, obviously that means you can play this on either player's turn. And typically you want to play a lot of these effects and cards on your opponent's turn, so that way you can have control, right? Because that's the idea of control. Your opponent does something and you do something in response, right? So you always want to be able to react and respond to what your opponent does. Typically you're going to keep your energy up, so that way you can make all your main plays on your opponent's turn, not necessarily your turn. Some plays you'll do on your turn, of course, but most of your plays will be on your opponent's turn, so I try to make sure I have a lot of cards that work on your opponent's turn, so that way you're constantly interacting with your opponent, like a control player. Although when you play this card, your opponent chooses places 1 card from the top of the deck and sends it to drop. So just by playing this card, they already have to mill, and then you choose up to 2 of your opponent's battle cards, ignoring barrier, which is awesome, right? And minus 10k from those battle cards for the duration of the turn, which can help you defensively, but also will trigger your leader's effect twice. So your opponent will mill 2 more cards on top of the mill, the 1 mill they already did. So that's 3 just by playing this card. And he's 20k double strike, so use them as a finisher, obviously. But we're mainly trying to get the minus abilities and the mills. We have Cooler, Suffocating Tyranny. We got a new Cooler, which is why I made this deck, because we have some more toys to play with. He's a 25k triple strike, so definitely a finisher right there. Arrival, red blue, of course. Pay 1 red, 1 blue, and 1 of anything, so it costs 3 to play him. Through Arrival. Auto. When this card is played or attacks, your opponent places the top card of their deck into the drop area. So that's nice. So not only when you play him, your opponent mills a card. Every time you attack with him, your opponent mills a card. So you have a reusable way of milling your opponent, other than your leader effect. And the idea is to always have the ability to mill multiple times, at least 2 to 3 times a turn. And then choose up to one of your opponent's battle cards and it gets minus 25k power for the turn. So that could, you know, drastically, that can help you kill something easily. A lot of battle cards are 25k or less, so you can obviously kill something with that, but also trigger your leader's ability to make your opponent mill a card on top of the fact that you already make the mill for playing this card, so you get 2 mills just off of playing this card. Second auto, at the end of your turn, right? So if you play this on your opponent's turn, still at the end of your turn, you may return this card to its owner's hand. If you do, switch up to one of your red or blue energy to activate. So it's an optional effect, but it's an effect you'll definitely want to take advantage of, because you'll arrive on your opponent's turn, you know, trigger the mill, trigger your leader's effect. Since you minus on your opponent's turn, if you're on your leader's front side, you'll draw a card. If you're on your leader's back side, you'll draw a card. So you're going to draw a card for playing this card. You're going to make your opponent mill twice for playing this card. You're going to kill something for playing this card, right? So it's a lot going on playing this card on your opponent's turn. And then on your turn, obviously 25k triple strike, you can go in and try to go hard and finish your opponent off, or at least, you know, bring them down to kill range. And then at the end of the turn, bounce this bad boy back to hand, so you can untap an energy, especially if you tapped out. Untap an energy. You definitely want to be able to untap a red energy, so that way you can like be able to play your Violent Raise if you need to. You know, got to get that extra turn, right? And then bounce this back to hand, so that way you can, you know, reuse it. But you definitely want to be able to keep arriving, keep minusing something 25k, draw, mill, right? All that good battle strategies. This minus 25k definitely can help you defensively, of course. Don't have to explain all the different uses for making something, a battle card, weaker. You can figure that out on your own, obviously. Full power Frieza, 100% overdrive. 30k triple strike, another potential win con right there, right? Another finisher. Auto, when this card attacks, choose all of your opponent's battle cards, ignoring bear, which is important, and they get minus 30k power for the duration of the turn. You know, some of these cards, you will notice some of these cards says ignoring barrier, which is important, because a weakness of the deck would be battle cards that have barrier. But since we do have cards that ignore barrier, we at least have some way of circumventing that weakness. So keep that in mind, that battle cards with barrier can be a problem, but not 100%, but can be. Ignoring barrier, and they get minus 30k power for the duration of the turn, so you can essentially board wipe just by attacking. Plus, you trigger your leader's effect, right, to make the mill for each of those battle cards that lost 30k power. And then the second auto, when the power of one of your opponent's battle cards is decreased, your opponent places 2 cards from the top of their deck until drop rate. So it's just like the leader, except it does 2 cards instead of 1. So this will trigger, the first auto will trigger its second auto, plus it will trigger your leader's auto. So your opponent will be milling 3 cards per each battle card you do this effect on. So let's say they have 10 battle cards and you play this and swing. Now you're going to make them mill 30 cards just off of 1 attack. Obviously, when you play this, you won't need to mill 30. You might even if you just mill 15 off of this this battle card's effect, the battle card with the leader, your opponent is going to, 15 just milling 15 is enough, right? Because 3 times 5, right? 3 times 5, 15 is enough, because by the time you play this, your opponent should already be low on cards. Especially if they're playing a 50 card deck, they already take 14 cards out the deck. 6 card draw, 8 cards for the life, so that's already 14 cards out the deck. Then they're drawing a card every turn, charging energy, that kind of stuff. But they're drawing a card every turn, so let's say by turn 5, so that's 5 cards on top of from just drawing 5 plus. And let's add the fact that, let's say their leader draws a card, so then that's 10 cards in 5 turns, plus the 14 cards when they start, for the 8 for the life, 6 for their hand, and that right there is 24 cards. That's nearly half their deck right there. Right? If they have a 50 card deck, that's nearly half the deck. They'll have 26 cards left in their deck, And if you do this one time, that's 15 out of the 26, which leaves them with 11. Right, so 11 cards. You know, so all you have to do is so pretty much you just gotta mill them for 11 for the first 5 turns, 11 cards for the first 5 turns, and then once you play this and swing and make them mill 15 more cards, 11, 15, that's 26, and that's against a 50 card deck. So that's like basic math, just something I just off the top of my head. So you get a pretty good idea that it doesn't take too much to mill to deck your opponent out with this deck, when you keep that in mind, that they're already going to be playing with essentially a 36 card deck, and then if they draw a card per turn plus draw a card for the leader every turn, that's potential in 5 turns, that's 10 extra cards. So that brings them from 36 to 26, and then all you need is this Frieza to do 15 cards, which means they'll have 11 left. So all you have to do is make them mill 11 before turn 5 with everything else you have. And we already know this cooler mills 3, this cooler can mill 3, you know, so 3 times 4 is 12, so you just got to mill 3 times 4 times, you know, right? And then so that would be 12 plus the 15 from Frieza, plus your opponent drawing every turn and attacking and drawing for the leader every turn, plus the first 14 cards that we took out the deck out of a 50 card. So you get it. The math adds up really quick. So your opponent already hurts themselves just by playing the game. Playing a 50 card deck, they already hurt themselves. It makes it easier for you to mill them out. So what else? Where we at? We're at the leader. We went cooler. Okay, so we're at Frieza. All right, so now Vegeta exploiting weakness, counterplay. Okay, so you can play this pretty much any time, but you typically want to wait until your opponent drops a good amount of battle cards, so that way you can get the most out of this card. Because this card works a lot like full power Frieza in a way, but it works on your opponent's turn because you drop it on your opponent's turn, right? So it has a permanent, if your leader card is red, which it is, reduce the energy cost of this card in your hand by 2, which means it costs 3 to play on your opponent's turn. So you play it for 3 on your opponent's turn. And then auto, when you play this card, choose all of your opponent's battle cards, and they get minus 20k power for the duration of the turn. This doesn't ignore barriers, so keep that in mind. And then if it's your opponent's turn, which obviously would be, choose up to one of your leader cards and it gets 5k power for the duration of the turn. So it boosts your leader's power, so it greatly increases your chance of surviving that turn, you know, reducing how many attacks your opponent can do, plus the minus 20k to all your opponent's battle cards. So if they still have battle cards in play that didn't die from this effect, right, because this essentially is a board wipe, at least they're drastically weaker. Your leader's stronger by 5k for the duration turn, so your survival rate is much higher. So it has defensive capabilities, as well as, you know, since it's minusing your opponent's battle cards, it will trigger your leader's effect, and of course it'll trigger multiple times. So if your opponent has 5 battle cards, you're making them mill 5. And remember, we did say you just need to mill your opponent at least 11 cards, you know, before you do the Frieza play, right? If you're going that route, in order to deck your opponent out. So there's that. And then that's all the card does. Obviously, you could play this on your turn and, you know, get the same result. So you can literally play this on your turn. You'll be playing it for 5, of course. Sorry. I'm thinking of Topo. You'll be playing this for 3, because as long as your leader's red, this costs 3 all the time. So you can play this. You can play this for 3 on your turn and still get the minus 20k ability to weaken your opponents. Of course, with your leader, you'll get to draw. So keep that in mind. Every time you're doing this play and minusing stuff, you will draw each time. So you will be able to replace them, you know, by drawing a card. And then, of course, get the board wipe and the mill on top of that, plus increase your survival rate. You know, you always want the extra turn, right? More turns means more chances of milling. More milling means more chances of winning. Milling is winning. All right. A milli. Kaioken Goku. The 15k deflect. Auto, when you play this card from your hand, choose all your opponent's battle cards with 20k power or less and KO them. So it's a basic board wipe. Active main, pay 2 red if your leader card is red, which it is. Place this card from your hand into the drop area and choose one of your opponent's battle cards, ignoring barrier, and it gets minus 25k power for the turn. So this helps you deal with any problematic battle cards that has barrier that might be getting in your way, as well as since it's doing a minus ability, of course, you'll trigger your leader's effect, which is always nice. The fact that you can play multiple copies of these a turn, pay 2 red, pitch this, minus something by 25k, and then pay 2, pitch another copy, and do it again. You can get more mills a turn, plus be able to clear your opponent's board in the process. So that's always good to have. And again, it's barrier hate, so that's important because barrier can be a weakness to this deck. So gotta have some barrier hates, right? We have Yamcha, Merciless Barrage, counterplay. You can't play counterplay skills other than this card for the turn. If you play this card, choose up to 2 of your opponent's battle cards. They get minus 15k power for the turn. Then play this card, so you'll minus 2 battle cards 15k, which will trigger your leader's effect twice, so your opponent will mill 2 cards for playing this. And you can play this card for free if you have a red unison with 2 or more markers in play. So gotta love the freeness. Obviously you can only do this once, but once the turn works. Again, you're increasing your survival rate because you're making your opponent's battle card weaker, potentially either killing them or just making them weak enough that they can't do damage that turn, and milling your opponent for 2 cards. Again, you don't have to mill your opponent that much, just enough to get them into kill range, right? Or to mill range. Then we have Oceanus, Negative Energy Explosion. It's a blocker with counter attack. Choose one card from your hand, discard it, negate the attack, and play this card. If you play the card, your opponent can't attack for the turn unless they place the top 4 cards of their deck into their drop area. So this further helps with the milling, because again, remember we said all you really need to do is mill your opponent at least 11 cards minimum, just to get them into kill range for full power Frieza. The more you mill them, the better, but you get the idea. Minimum of 11 card mill. You want to get them down to that sweet 15 or less card scenario. And then permanent during your opponent's turn, reduce the cost of this card in your hand by 3. So it costs 2 on your opponent's turn, and that's it. You don't get to use the auto because you don't have a Shadow Dragon leader, but you get 2 effects that you need anyway. So you got a blocker, you negate an attack, and you have the potential to mill your opponent 4 or more cards if they choose to attack. Kawaso, Manipulate Supremacy. This gives you a lot of, just by this card alone already gives you an advantage because you're able to manipulate the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck. So that gives you control right off the bat. That's just powerful right there. That's already an advantage in itself because you have control of what your opponent does and does not have. What they can and cannot do. You can literally prevent them from getting their win con or a key combo piece or a negate or anything, right? By using this card, because you'll be controlling their draw every turn with this. If you have multiple copies of this card, obviously, along with the mill effects, very devastating because you'll trigger his effect, right? Manipulate the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck, then trigger something to mill, like we can use Lord Slug, for example, since it's something we can keep on the field and keep using his minus 10k ability every turn. And just do this effect every turn. It's just like mill, right? And after we do 1 copy of this card's effect to manipulate the top 3 and then mill, we can use a 2nd copy to manipulate the top 3 cards of our opponent's deck. And then on our opponent's turn, if we play a mill effect, a minus effect, which will trigger a mill, then further getting rid of more and more cards. So that's the way we definitely want to use this. We want to manipulate our opponent's deck, the top of the deck, so we can mill what we want to mill instead of controlled mill. Mill control, controlled mill. We don't want to just mill anything randomly, especially if it could benefit our opponent. We want to make sure that we never benefit our opponent. Then we have testing the opposition, counter attack if your leader card is mono red, which it is. Negate the attack and then play one Cyberman token with 5k power, 0 cost 5k combo power, and the token gains blocker for the turn. And then has the permanent that if you have 5 or less life, you can activate this counter skill for free by adding a card from your life to your hand. Of course, this is not once per turn, so you could do this multiple times if you have multiple copies of this card and enough life to play the multiple copies. So you could potentially stop 2 attacks per each copy, which is always nice to have against going wide strategies. Then we have a Violent Raise, counter attack if your leader card is red, which it is. Negate the attack. You may choose one card in hand and discard it. If you do, choose one of these abilities. Your opponent can't attack with battle cards with 20k power or more for the turn, or your opponent can't attack with unison cards with 20k power or more for the turn. We normally pick the battle card part of the effect because it's easy for your opponent to go wide with multiple battle cards than it is with unison, since you can only have one unison a turn. So really good against going wide strategies. So you gotta have it. You always want to survive. You always want that extra turn so you can get that extra mill. Lord Slug, Giant Force, critical, 15k. Plus 1 ability, you may choose one card from your hand, discard it. If you do, choose up to one of your opponent's battle cards, ignore and barrier, and it gives minus 10k power for the turn. So this is a reusable way to trigger off our leader's ability to mill our opponent. So definitely we'll take advantage of that. It also has the -4 auto if your leader card is red, which it is. When your opponent activates a counter skill, deal 1 damage to them. So we could, we have a burn effect, so we could obviously another win con. We could use that to win. Once we get our opponent's life points low enough, we can use that as a win con. We have Shenron Unison of Calamity. Has a permanent, your red cards can attack your opponent's battle cards in active mode. So this will come in handy. Because, this has a +1 ability that lets us choose up to 2 of our opponent's battle cards and minus 15k power for them, which will trigger our leader effect to make our opponent mill 2 cards in that situation. But because we're also weakening battle cards with this, of course we can attack with our leader, unison battle cards to our opponent's battle cards, and KO them easier because we're making them weak. So we're getting the mills off this effect, plus we're able to take down battle cards with this. Obviously you can easily take down a 30k battle card with this effect by turning that 30k into 15k, and since this is a 20k body, you can take advantage of attacking and try to take that 15k down with your 20k body. So there's that, and then and these are +1 effects you notice, which helps drastically increase their chances of staying on the field longer to keep giving you the mills. So essentially this will let you pretty much mill your opponent once per turn. This will get you to mill your opponent essentially twice per turn, depending on the situation. And then it has the -2 ability. Look at your opponent's hand, choose up to 1 battle card with 25k power or less, and discard it. So this will give you hand knowledge as well as it will give you some hand control, right? Because you get to get rid of anything good in your opponent's hand, like maybe a topo or something like that, or like a battle card that can negate or something like that, or win con. There's a lot of reasons why you want to look in your opponent's hand and get rid of something. Another thing is you can obviously use this to look at your opponent's hand and see if you should go for game this turn, or wait until next turn to go for game or whatnot, or be more defensive. Like, just being able to look at your opponent's hand is just way too powerful of an effect to have. It's too broken, and Bandai lets us have it. And then Jiren, Legend of Universe 11, has an auto. When your opponent plays a battle card or unison card, you may choose that card and it gets minus 10k power for the turn. If you do, negate the skill for the turn. What's nice about this is that typically this, you would think of this as just only useful on your opponent's turn, which is good to have, right? The ability to do it on your opponent's turn, so you could trigger your leader's effect on your opponent's turn, which is important, and helps you be defensive. But at the same time, is that on your turn, if you have this and your opponent plays a rival plays, or tuples or anything of that nature, you can, use this auto, make the battle card weaker, triggering your leader's effect off to make your opponent mill. So you can take advantage of that, and then it's once per turn. So once on your turn, once on your opponent's turn, back and forth, back and forth. So take advantage of that. Has a +1 ability, which further keeps it on the field. Right, once you play, it sticks. This card gains double strike, so you can take advantage of that to take down unisons. Just use it as a finisher, take your opponent down. And then it has the -3 ability, active battle. Choose up to one of your opponent's battle cards, ignoring barrier, and it gets -25k power for the turn. So that's very useful defensively. Plus it helps you trigger your mill. It does ignore barrier, so it's useful in that regards. Especially if your opponent has a battle card that has barrier and it's a finisher and he's trying to attack your leader, you can trigger this to help you take down that threat. Then we have SS3 Gohanks. It's 4-drop. Ultimate dual attack blocker, so you can attack with it, restand it, and use it to block, or attack with it twice if you want to apply pressure. Then has the auto when this card is played. Choose all your opponent's cards, ignoring barrier, and they get -25k power for the turn. So this acts like another Frieza, or I should say more like out of Vegeta. Vegeta does -20k, this does -25k, right? But with the leader, it'll cause your opponent to mill. So if your opponent has 5 battle cards, for example, and you play this, not only do you get to wipe out all 5 battle cards with this effect, potentially, right? Since this does ignore barrier as well, your opponent will mill 5 cards for that. So just further, has synergy with the dex, effect, leader effect. +1 auto ability. When your opponent attacks with a battle card, you may choose it, and it gets -25k power for the turn. So it, gets a marker, which is always good, especially since it's also a blocker. And so once you play this, it sticks to the field. I have not yet lost this card off the field. Once I put it on the field, it stays. So it's really good when I've used it before. And then you're -25k from something, so you're potentially killing something, as well as you're getting your leader's effect to mill your opponent. And of course you draw, so all that good benefits. And then it has the -4 active main ability. This card gains 15k power and triple strike for the turn, and at the end of the turn, switch this card to activable. So it becomes a 40k triple strike. And remember, it already has dual attack, so it's a 40k triple strike that can attack twice. So it can potentially do 6 damage all by itself. So it's definitely a finisher. And the fact that it has the added ability of restanding, so it could be a blocker in case somehow your opponent survived, right? You still have the blocker effect. You still have the ability to block with it. Plus, you still have the auto to, to -25k to something. So you could potentially stop 2 things just by having this on the field, as well as triggering your leader's mill effect. Really, really good cards. Fun synergy. Obviously, one of the things you can do with this leader, this unison, is not play it for 4, but play it for 5. So that way you can just go right ahead and -4 and just immediately take advantage of a 40k triple strike. Bang, 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 and then, with the dual attack, and then restand it at the end of your opponent's turn and go from there. So the best way to use them is to play them for 5 energy. And that's the end of the video.